How many people remember the game show Truth or Consequences? I won't ask if you remember the radio version. That ran from 1940 to 1957. The TV show ran until 1988, and I suppose for most people there were several hosts. The most popular or well-known probably was Bob Barker. And as I got ready, as I thought of the title for this sermon, and then I thought of that game show, I remembered it, but I didn't remember it. Like, what exactly was it? So I looked it up, just like we do for any information today. I asked the Google and found out that it was this game show, and the truth side was they would start off by asking contestants a question, but it was a real obscure question, and sometimes even it was a joke. And I wanted to see some of this, so I went to YouTube and watched some clips, and the clip I saw, the first one, it was two men, and Bob Barker asked them the question, again, really a joke. It said, why was the wife concerned that her husband was a light drinker? And both of them like, well, we don't know. And then the answer was because he would start drinking at night and not stop till it got light. And so because they didn't know the answer to that, then they had to do the consequence, which for them was try to learn to ride a unicycle. So that was, sort of funny and different things. And as I read, one of the producers of the show said, from the start, most contestants preferred to answer the question wrong, even if they did know it, in order to perform the stunt. So they preferred the consequence. And that definitely made me think about us and today in this sermon. Which do we give preference to? The truth or the consequences? And as we're going to see today, we're in the Gospel of Mark. We've been going through and seeing this overall theme of the whole book, which is, where is our focus? Is it on the spiritual or the physical? And we said that those are like headings, or they're columns. Is it on God or us, heaven or earth, eternity or temporary things? And definitely we've seen, is it, on humility or pride in the true sense of that word, not just bragging or not, but, acknowledging God for who He is, realizing who I am. And so that's been the underlying theme of the whole book, and we're in Mark chapter 11. So this chapter starts the last week of Jesus' life. It began with Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. He rides in on the donkey colt, and everything about it, he is finally openly announcing, I am the Messiah. And you remember that key verse in that section there, verse 11, he gets into Jerusalem after riding in with all the fanfare, and it says he looks around the temple, and it was late, so he left. He went back to Bethany after all of that. And we said the whole point of that is that gave him time to stop and think. He knew, I've just announced I'm the Messiah. He saw the temple, and he knew what needed to be done, which he was going to do the next, he decided to do the next day, but he had all night to think about it. And he went all in. Well, what did he think about that night? Obviously, he thought about the consequences. If I go in there tomorrow and I cleanse that temple, I throw out the money changers and I stop everything from going on because it shouldn't be, I'm all in now. I've said I'm the Messiah. Now this is the course I'm taking, and it just like he thought and he knew would happen. The leaders said, we're going to kill him. All the leaders. Some had already said it, now they all said it. So that night, Jesus was doing this. He was considering the truth. Here's what I know is right and what I should do. Here's the consequences. And he went all in and accepted the consequences. Well, we're going to focus on those today, and we're going to ask ourselves, as you see on the handout, are my choices and actions affected more by truth or by consequences? And of course, we all want to say truth, right? We're Christian. We know what the right answer is. What's truth? And I'm sure in some cases that is true. But is it in all cases? Are there some situations where we weigh, all right, here's the truth, here's what's right, here's what will happen if I do it, what will happen if I don't, and maybe we're swayed more by the consequences. Let's look at this and see. Mark chapter 11, starting at verse 27. It says, and they came again to Jerusalem. So this is the day after. It's really Tuesday. Sunday he rides in, Palm Sunday. Monday he goes in and cleanses the temple. And then this is the day after. And as he was walking in the temple, the chief priests and the scribes and the elders, so the Jewish religious leaders, came to him and said to him, by what authority are you doing these things, or who gave you this authority to do them? Now, they already knew, certainly they knew what he would say in some sense, and they really should have even known, and I think did in some way, what the answer was. He had shown whose authority he had by the miracles he did. That's what miracles were for, to credential the messenger. Someone says, hey, I've got a message from God. How do you know? Well, if God empowers them to do a miracle, God is saying, yeah, they're with me. And Jesus had done plenty of that. They knew he's from God. But, they didn't like that answer, for one. And two, they're probably hoping that he will give some answer that will get him in trouble. Maybe he'll say something that they could accuse him of blasphemy. Maybe he would say something after riding in like that, and Hosanna, the Son of David. Maybe he'd say, I'm the King of the Jews, and that'd get him in trouble with the Romans. So that's why they ask him, even though they know the answer. And Jesus said to them, I will ask you one question. Answer me, and I will tell you by what authority I do these things. That's interesting. Why didn't he just say, God's authority? And I think the reason is, and it's what I say over and over, read the good book like a good book. And in any good book, it's more important and it's more powerful to show versus tell. And so that's what he's going to do. Instead of coming out and saying it, he's going to get them to make this huge point. That's the basis of what we're going to look at today. And show just what they were like, what they were focused on when it comes to truth or consequences. So verse 30, he asks, here's the question. Was the baptism of John the Baptist, from heaven or from man? And his point with that is, okay, John the Baptist, everything he did, was that God saying, hey, I want you to do this? And so he was a prophet sent from God with God's authority, giving God's message, or was he just some guy, some nut, who said, hey, everyone, you got to do this? And Jesus asked them, answer me. Verse 31, they discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? Because they clearly didn't when you go back and read. But shall we say from man? They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So they answered Jesus, we do not know. And Jesus said to them, neither will I tell you by what authority I do these things. He stuck to it. He didn't tell them. All right, well, what do we get from this? We see this exchange with Jesus. And again, I think the whole reason that he didn't just say, God's authority is he wanted us to see what was going to happen here, because it provides a very strong lesson for us. And to do that, we need to look at some points that come out. The first one, I think, is that every significant situation, decision, question has two levels. It has the level of what is right and what is true, but it also has the level of what will the consequences be for affirming what is right, for doing what is right, saying what is true. You look at the Jewish leaders regarding John. Look at verse 31 again. They discussed it with one another, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say, why then did you not believe him? But shall we say from man? They were afraid of the people, for they all held that John really was a prophet. So you see, between these levels of what's right and what's true, and what are the consequences, where was their focus? You can say it louder. It was on them. On which of those? Between what's true or what's the consequence? Which one? Exactly. Do they mention anything at all about what's true? What's right? Well, here's the evidence that says he was from God. Here's the evidence that says he was. No. It's all, if we say this, Jesus, is going to say, well, why didn't you believe him? And if we say this, well, the people are going to be upset. It's entirely the consequence. They don't ask one single thing, is it true or not? Which one is true? He's from God or he's from man? Nothing. Their focus was entirely on the consequence. They knew the truth side. They just ignored it. Well, the same thing for us. And I always like to use extreme examples to sort of make the point and then apply it. If you were captured by ISIS and they said, are you a Christian? You see the two levels there? What's the truth? What's going to be the consequence? Yeah, the truth is, if you are, I am, the consequence is they're going to kill me. Those you see very clearly, those two sides of things. Well, it's the same for any significant choice that we have. Personally, if I'm at work and I'm called, I'm asked by the boss, or I'm tempted to do something, do I lie? Do I, cheat in some way? Well, I've got what's true and what's right. I shouldn't do it. What's the consequence? Maybe I think I'll get ahead if I do it. Maybe I think I'll be punished. I'll miss out if I don't do it. And so both sides there. If, and this can be, younger teenagers, this can be adults. I've seen it all across the spectrum. Should I have sex outside of marriage? Well, what's the right answer? What's the consequence? The consequence, there's both sides of that. What will the effect be if I say yes, if I say no? Two sides of that question. The Bible study and prayer. Should I spend time reading the Bible and praying? All right, what's the consequence going to be? If I say yes, do I need to go to bed earlier? Do I need to get up earlier? What's that there? Do I need to stop doing something else? I remember a quote I saw a while ago, and it was by someone who doesn't use them. He was quoting someone that said, one of the effects of Facebook will be to disprove the idea I didn't have time to read the Bible and pray. We make time for what we want to. So there's truth and consequence to that. The same thing for churches. As a church, to make a decision together, as the leaders of a church to make a decision. We talked about the man-made traditions and applications. You have the truth. What is right? What does the Bible say? And then what is the consequence if we do one thing or the other? If we, I've talked about leadership roles and men as the leaders, but how's that apply to things that women do? All right, what's the truth? What's the consequences if we follow what it seems the truth is? New Testament worship patterns. I just more and more become convinced, the New Testament church, it wasn't, a large chunk of the time just one person talking and everyone just listening. That's not it, all right? Well, all right, what's true? Now, what's the consequence? What would that do to a worship service if we tried to be really more like the New Testament church? We talk about that. We're the New Testament church in the Restoration movement. What would the consequence be? How difficult would that be? What turmoil would it cause? I want us to realize at this level, just don't assume that everything is one. And I think sometimes we do. I've had people come before me, should I have sex outside of marriage? Well, God wants me to be happy. And that's really, you're like putting the two together. To answer if it's right is the same as answering to the consequence. God wants to know. And when you separate the two, you realize that. So what I'm saying here is when you face a situation, think of a situation that's serious. Do you realize there are two sides? What's right? What's the consequence? In that case, if I do what's wrong, I'm happy. The consequence, in one sense of the word. Well, so they sort of put them together and they ignore the fact, there's really two questions there, two levels to that question. Always, if there's a significant question, ask, what's true, what's right, and what's the consequence, instead of just focusing on what's the consequence and basing my decision on that will be what's right, what's true. Well, that leads us into the next one. In every significant situation, decision, or question, we decide whether to give more weight to the truth or the consequences. In other words, whether to act based on, all right, what is right or what's true, that'll decide things for me, or what's the consequence. That's how I'll base my decision. You look at the Jewish leaders, it was clear where their focus was, right? What's the consequence to us? And so they answered Jesus, we do not know, because in their case, either one of the answers, would have gotten them in trouble. It's true that it was from God. Well, then Jesus, why didn't you believe it? They didn't want that consequence. Or what they wanted to say, that we don't believe it's from God, and maybe they didn't believe it's from God, that would have got a consequence. So they just say, we don't know. Like, we're going to ignore the truth altogether, and we're just going to lie and say we don't know, because that one gives us a better consequence, a better result there. And they have the fear of both of those. Well, for us, again, if you were captured by ISIS, and they said, are you a Christian? You know the truth, you know the consequence. And I really believe that most Christians, many Christians, 50% of, I don't know, I think most Christians would say, knowing they're going to be put to death, I am a Christian. The things we struggle with are smaller things relatively to life or death. Most of us don't face that. We've never been captured by ISIS, and okay, are you a Christian, knowing I'll be put to death if I say yes. But we face situations all through our lives, maybe day in and day out, that are less in the sense of life or death, but still significant, and they still have both sides of these. The ones that I just mentioned above as we talk about, okay, I'm at work and I realize here's what the boss is asking me to do, here's what would get me ahead. Again, I'm faced with, here's what's true or right, here's the consequence. All right, which one do I give more weight to? Which one do I act out of? Sex outside of marriage, what's true or what's right? What's the consequence? I'd really like to. Which do I give more weight to? The idea of Bible study and prayer. I don't want to give up this. I don't want to get up early, that's for sure. I don't like getting up as it is. Don't want to go to bed earlier. Which do I give more weight to? Do I find time to spend time in the Word and prayer or not? I know what's right. I know what's true. I know what the consequence is. My actions then are going to say, which do I give more weight to? Same thing for churches. We're faced with questions. Our group of churches is faced with the question sometimes, is baptism part of the plan of salvation? Well, we're faced with, is it right? And then what's the consequence? And maybe you don't feel a lot of consequences because, you're among a group that agrees with you, but sometimes if you get out there, I'm at the age where I can't remember if I've actually been there myself or I've read it. I know a friend was at a seminar once, a large seminar, and I've read it. It was on cults, and I wanted to learn about different cults, and they're going down the list. You've got Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and all this, and Christian Church, Church of Christ on the list. Like, whoa, where'd that one come from? And it turns out one of the marks of a cult is, thinking you're saved by works, and they think our view of baptism means you're saved by works. So they include us on that list. There's a consequence. I've interacted with people at times. I'd rather not have that consequence, but if that's what I face, I'm going to stand for the truth. Okay. We're all shaking our heads on that because we like that one. What about other things? As a church, I mentioned, I truly believe, let's look at it and see sometime. What was the New Testament worship service like? Well, people came with something to share. A song, a story, an example. It wasn't like whose name's on the list for this week to say something. You're the only one who gets to say it. Men and women both shared. Men were the leaders of the church. Men and women both shared. Here's what God's done. Here's a verse that stood out to me. Here's a song that I think's special. Is that the way the New Testament church was? What's the truth of the matter? And what would the consequence be? How would that change things up? Well, that'd make some people, it might make me uncomfortable. Sort of like being the guy that gets to talk up here for 30 minutes or more last week. It was raining last week. You guys weren't busy, so. Gotta get out sooner today. The sun's shining. I like this. Yeah, Marissa's like, yeah, you sure? What would the consequence be? What am I giving more weight to? We've always done it this way. Guys, we're faced with this too. Don't just look at that. But yeah, we all shake our heads on the baptism one because we all got the right answer there. What about this other one? Restoration Movement wants to restore the New Testament church. Well, we want to restore baptism and elders and Lord's Supper every week. Well, if we want to restore this other stuff, let's not be crazy, Steve. What do we do? What do we think about as we look at that? And it was interesting, the leader's specific answer, what did they say to Jesus? We do not know. They knew. They knew. They didn't know what to say. How many times if we face a situation like, well, I just really don't know what we should do there. We probably know. We have an inclination, but we just don't want to follow through on that because of the consequence. And so we say we don't know, and we're going to see later, okay, then find out. We got a responsibility. And sometimes we don't know is a cop-out. And so we end up not doing the thing that has the consequences. So we've made our decision. I have based my decision on the consequences. I've just been a weasel and said, I don't know, instead of just standing up and saying no. Let's think about it. Which we give more weight to, in other words, which we act out based on, determines whether we experience God's power or not. Read the good book like a good book. We're in Mark chapter 11. What have we seen? The chapter starts off with Jesus going into Jerusalem. I'm the Messiah. Got that verse, like, am I going to put my chips all in or not? And Jesus in a poker reference. I know that's tough to take together, but am I going to go all in? And the next day he does. I'm the Messiah, and here's the Messiah ship that I'm bringing. What you guys are doing is wrong. That is not the way God wants things to be. He was all in and he knew the consequences. And then tucked in between that, we saw last week this strange fig tree thing. Like, why is that there? Because God wants us to experience his power. If we're blown away by a fig tree withering, Jesus is like, guys, that's nothing compared to what God can do and wants to do all the time in your lives. This is all together. And here we talk about truth or consequences, that you take it all together. It's saying, if I go all in, if I base my decisions based on the truth versus the consequences, I will experience the power of God. I'll see it in my life. We'll see it as a church. You look at these Jewish leaders, and we always paint them as the bad guys in the black hats, and that's true in the one sense, but do you ever stop and think about it? Who should be more all in than the religious leaders of Israel? God had said, Israel, you're my chosen nation to bring about the Messiah. They're the religious. Who should be more all in? Who should be experiencing God's power more than them? No one. We're so used to the story, we know they're not. We know they're not all in. We know they're not experiencing. But think about it. They should have been. How sad it is that they missed that. How much of God's power did they experience? Because, they're basically, their relationship with God is we're doing our will in God's name. Our will, but we want to make sure, we throw, it's like ostensibly for God. We're the Jewish religious leaders, so there's got to be something Jewish and religious about it. There wasn't either. And so they experienced none of God's power. Well, for us, we've been talking about it. It all fits together. This all-in idea, I said, it's a blank sheet Christianity. I sign my name to a blank sheet. I don't say, God, tell me what you want me to do, and I'll see if I'll do it or not. I've already signed my name as a believer. Hopefully we understood that. When I became a Christian, I signed my name. God gets to fill it in as we go. And that's the truth side. I face a decision. I base my actions on what's true and what's right, not what's the consequence. As much as I see the consequence, as much as I don't like the consequence, as much as I'd like to do the wrong thing and have the good consequence. Yeah, I said, no, God, you, blank sheet, truth. Only that commitment to God, which is what we make when we repent. I commit to you, God, fully. Only that focus, that spiritual focus we've been talking about this whole time. Only that humility that says, I have no right to do anything else. God is God and I'm not. He's the creator. I have to surrender to Him. He's the sustainer. I need to rely on Him. Why would I think my wisdom and my power would ever do anything better? And the faith that then follows through on that. It's one thing to know it, to believe it, the humility. It's another than, all right, I'm going to step out on that chasm where I can't see where I'm going to land, if I'm going to land. Only that will experience God's power. Personally in our lives, I shared the story last week. Lisa had been listening to this book, and I listened to part of it, Corrie ten Boom's book, A Tramp for God. Chapter after chapter is her experiencing God's power. Because you know what? Chapter after chapter, she's faced with truth or consequence. I don't like what this looks like it's going to do, but I've already told God I'm doing whatever He tells me. I'm following the truth, not the consequence. And so she kept experiencing God's power over and over. And you know what was really interesting? Sometimes the consequences for her looked like at first less ministry. I remember one of the chapters, and she went into this place, and they were supposed to, go through the checkpoint, I think at that point into East Germany, and they got stuck at the checkpoint. And she's like, God, I only have a few hours to go and talk to these people. And she began to realize, maybe God wants me to talk to the few people at the checkpoint. And she did. She had a powerful witness on those people. And so sometimes it looks like, oh, God, the consequence, if I follow you, is going to be less ministry. And God's like, no, it's not. Trust me. Do what's right. Do what's true. Leave the rest to me. Leave the results to me. As a church, so many churches are growing through this attractional model that says we do all these things to attract people to us. That's not the biblical model. God's model is not come and see, it's go and make disciples. We are to be witnesses as we go. We should have a model that's what it's based on. It is me being a witness to people around me. Not trying to, they got to come at some point, but it's all based on, hey, you come and see us. But you see some of that, and it looks like, all right, that works. Okay, it works on one level, but is it really showing God's power? I say again, people leave some of these churches and, wow, that was an awesome worship service. What was awesome about it? God and His power usually isn't on the list. It's the band and how good the speaker was and how cool the projection and everything was. Nothing inherently evil, but if it detracts from God's power, what's true? As a church, how should we be churching? How should we be doing this? What is true, not what will the consequences be? Even if it looks like, hey, the consequence will be more ministry. Again, that Corrie ten Boom examples, they were really eye-opening. A couple times where she's like, hey, God, this is, how can I do ministry? And God showed he had a better plan all along, and it showed his power. Now, does relying on God's power mean that we'll have no consequences, at least no negative consequences? I think we know the answer. No. But we'll see God's power. That's the whole point. Sometimes we avoid relying on God's power because here's what it looks like the consequences will be, and maybe they will. But in the midst of difficulty, in the midst of negative, difficult things happening, that's when God's power comes through. You think about it. You never see God's power unless there's a difficult situation, do you? No one's ever just walking along on a sunny day and everything is going right and God does a miracle. Something's wrong. They're running out of wine. There's a storm at sea. Someone's sick. Someone's dead. There's always a problem. And then God's power comes. We're like, oh, if we do this, it'll lead to a problem. And God's like, yeah, then I'll be able to do something. Trust me. Well, maybe you've got some questions, and I put it there, some possible questions. First of all, what if the consequences affect others? What if my stand at work affects not only me, but my team? What if my stand at work costs me a job and affects my wife and my kids? And what if taking a stand at church, some people don't like that if we change some things? All right, well, I tried to find an answer, and to me it was Acts chapter 5, verses 28 and 29. The apostles are speaking to the Jewish leaders, and the leaders say, first, we strictly charged you not to teach in this name of Jesus, yet here you have filled Jerusalem with your teaching, and you intend to bring this man's blood upon us. But Peter and the apostles answered, we must obey God rather than men. We must obey God rather than men. Well, I think that's answering the question. If the truth of a situation dictates something, then it doesn't matter. The consequences for me, we've all been shaking our head. Yeah, if I'm before ISIS, okay, I'll die. What about the consequences if it affects others? Again, people we know, people in the church, but this is what's right. I think that says there, I have to obey God, His truth, no matter what. And then another one, what if we don't know the truth regarding a specific choice? What if we really don't? Now, we've talked about it as we talk about, the application of what's a man-made tradition in a church. What's the application of the principle? Yeah, men are to be leaders of the church, but what are the applications? What's that look like? What's that include? What's it not include? Well, I don't know. What do you think the answer is if you don't know? Go to find out. Find out. And it starts with the Bible. I would say, I always talk about the growth triangle. I get into the Word. That's the foundation of the triangle. What does it say? If I don't know, then find out. I have a responsibility. I can't just keep answering, I don't know. Because if I'm acting either way, aren't I? I'm either doing something or not. And just to say, well, I don't know, now that probably means I'm basing it on the consequences. Because I don't want to find out the truth. It is, because I don't want to find out the truth. I haven't found out the truth, so it has to be the consequences I'm basing it on, right? If I don't know the truth. So I look to the Word. I do look at situations and see, all right, God, how have you worked? What have you done? Maybe I'm afraid of the consequences. Well, look and see what God has done in the midst of some difficult consequences. And I talk with other believers. Sit down and talk. We're meant to interact with the Word, about the Word. Study it together with someone you trust. See what it says. Part of finding out is, do I know, but I don't want to admit it? You need to ask that question. Do I know or have a very good suspicion, but I don't want to admit it? Why? Because of the consequences. Truth or consequences, guys? Which one do we give preference to? It struck me, why didn't Jesus answer them at the end? Jesus okay, so I'm not going to tell you. I love that. Why didn't he just say, hey, I'm from God, guys? I think the answer is he knew they weren't open to it. They already knew he was from God. They just didn't like that answer. It wasn't going to change anything. So he didn't answer them. And I think the lesson for us is, if we don't act on what we know, if we don't try to find out and be open to whatever the truth is, we're not going to get an answer from God. Because we've already said, God, I don't want your answer. I want you to give me the answer I like. Goes back to that James passage. If anyone lacks wisdom, let him ask in faith without any doubting. That doesn't mean let me believe he can give it. Let me believe there is a wise answer. And versus doubting, I don't even know if God has an answer. No, it's let me ask in faith, in total surrender and reliance upon God without any doubting. That word should be without any judging, without any contending. God, give me your answer, but it better not be this. He's not going to give us one. And not only an answer in terms of direction, but an answer to prayer. Why would we expect God's going to answer our prayers as a church for growth, as personally for whatever it is, if we've already said, well, I'm only going to listen to the answers I like, God? Think he's going to say, oh, all right, that's good enough. That's not humble at all, is it? God's God and I'm not. I take whatever answer he gives me. I've got to be surrendered to it, whether I like it or not. They didn't like his answer. They didn't like God's answer. They didn't like Jesus' answer. So Jesus says, I'm not going to give you another one. You've already shown. You're not humble. Well, what's the root problem here? What is it that's keeping us from following through on this either before or right now? And I think it's the rationalization. You know what? I follow God's truth in most areas. And by and large, I'd say the people in this room, we do, right? More times than not, we follow what God says to do, irregardless of the consequences. Most of the time, God, I follow your truth, not the consequences. God, there's a good reason to avoid the consequences here, because here's what the consequences will be. They'll affect me this way. They'll affect others this way. I've got a good reason not to follow the truth. Really? If that's the root problem, then what's the key to overcoming it? If I think I've got a better answer than God, what's this word we've been hearing over and over for so long? What? Definitely surrender, and it's part of that other word, humility. Yeah. Am I able to say, God, I'm following you enough? By and large, I'm doing it. You should be happy with that, God. Whoa. That's me not being humble. That's me not realizing God's God and I'm not. I'm saying God's God and I'm not too far behind. Yeah, I make a good point. Good case. God, this will affect other people. Let's do this. I know. I'm God. I know these things. I've told you to do it. It comes down to humility. Am I humble or not? It doesn't mean, that's why we've said for weeks, it doesn't mean do I brag when I do well. No. Do I truly live a life that says God's God and I'm not? I'm aware of my limitations. That's what humility is. And then also, as we think about that, the key to overcoming is when I finally get this, when I act out of truth, when I act in total humility, I will experience the power of God we saw last week, this mountain-moving power. I asked you, when's the last time you've been amazed by God? Have you been amazed by Him this week after last week? Do you think like He was too busy last week? If He didn't, too much to do, He was resting up from the week before, there's no reason we shouldn't come here each week and have an amazing... See, I think the New Testament, that's why they did. They had something amazing to share each week. I think it was a matter of, me, I'm next. I get to share. And just imagine what that would do to a group of people. Everyone coming and telling the amazing thing God did in their life that week. I think as a group of people, someone comes into that service and hears that. Whoa, I want to find out what you guys got. Yeah. I think that's the key there. And so the question is, do we want that? Do I really want to experience God's power? I've got to live my life based on the truth. And so what will I do now? I put it on your sheet there. Think of a situation you're facing right now or have faced. How much of my decision or action, as how I faced that, was based on the truth? I know this is the right thing to do. And how much of it was based on the consequence? If I do the right thing, here's what will happen. If I do the wrong thing, here's what will happen. How much? Either way. And then what would 100% truth, what would that choice look like in that situation you're facing or did face? What would that look? If I based it 100% on here's what God says is right, here's what I know I should do, irregardless of the consequence, what would 100% decision based on truth look like? That's to be our standard. That's what we're going for. And if we truly don't know, again, find out. Look at God's Word. Look how He's worked in your life and others' lives. Talk to other Christians about it. You know what comes next at this point. Here's where we get to decide, all right, am I going to do anything with this, or just think back to the Truth or Consequences show and these guys riding unicycles. What am I going to take away today? What am I going to do with what I've heard here? We're going to have our hymn of invitation, our hymn of decision, and every week each one of us decides whether to follow through or not. We all have that decision in one sense or the other. Certainly if you're here today and you haven't made the initial decision of I'm going to accept Christ personally, believe, repent, and be baptized, you need to make that one. You can now. You can come to us anytime and make that. Let's stand and sing.